Hi, I'm Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. Intellectual honesty can be a scary thing. It means setting aside your pride, putting your most cherished beliefs on the line, and examining them with honest and open inquiry, looking at them from dissenting viewpoints and considering all of the evidence and all the options and admitting a possibility that you might be wrong. That's so scary, in fact, that people have cloistered themselves away. They've locked out dissenting opinions, shunned them, or worse, through almost all of human history. But the New Covenant Group is different. Join us Sundays at 6 o'clock for Inspiring Honesty, authentic inquiry between a believer and a non-believer on the questions that really matter.
I like the way that Greg is engaged. He's enthusiastic about this in a very real way, which is excellent. I think he's ready to deal with the issues, bring out what he perceives, and to be honest with you, I'm more than excited and ready to respond.
When I was first asked to be on the show, I have to be honest, it was a little daunting. I've never seen, and as far as I'm aware, there's never been an atheist in a hosting position on a regular show through a Christian broadcast. That's a lot of pressure. I need to really represent my side well, but I'm excited. I think that this is going to be a fantastic opportunity for some important conversations that never would have happened if the Christians stayed with the Christians and the atheists stayed with the atheists and the theists stayed with the theists and the Muslims stayed with the Muslims. The conversations need to be addressed from multiple angles.
Whatever there is to risk through genuine dialogue, it probably isn't worth having.
In polite society, there have always been things that are considered taboo. A person's faith is beyond question. It's beyond challenge. It's sacred. Well, I disagree. And the New Covenant Group has invited me to be part of their show where, for the first time ever, an atheist, myself, can sit down with a believer and have real conversations about the subjects that matter, subjects that have always been off limits before. Hi, this is Inspiring Honesty, and I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. I'm here today. I'll be joined again by Bob Greaves, and I don't have a guest for the day. I wanted to make sure that we kept it open because I had an opportunity last night to meet up with a guest that had been on our show. I apologize. That's on my end. It looks we had a smoke alarm go off, but my wife is cooking. That's not anything that is surprising, but sorry, Anne. I love you. But I had an opportunity last night to meet with Eric Hovind, who was on the show about 6 weeks ago. He was in Green Bay, which is about a half hour away from where I live, or a half hour drive, and he presented at an event called Creation Quest. This was he invited me to come along with him. My brother and I went there, and I had no idea what it was going to be like. I walked in completely blind. I knew that there was a dinner involved and that there were three other speakers. He was joined by Kabir Baha-Biamila, who is a former Green Bay Packers player, Jay Siegert, who is part of I want to make sure I'm getting the name right here, the Creation Education Center based out of Waukesha, Wisconsin, which is about 2 hours away from where I live. And then also Mike LeMay, who was the MC of the night. He is the station director for Q90, which is a Christian radio station in the area that is very, very popular. And they're actually the ones who put on this event in the first place. It was a fantastic experience. This was the first opportunity. Excuse me, sorry, I had to send a message there. This was the first opportunity that I had to meet face to face with Eric Hovind, and really the first event of its kind I've ever personally attended. I've never been to a revival meeting. I've never been to a faith healing seminar, any sort of major rally of this kind. Other than this, I've been to church services and youth groups, and it was eye opening in many ways. It was a great experience, and frankly, what I really liked about it is I made sure I wore my Richard Dawkins Out campaign pin to the meeting, and I uh, was not shy about who I was, why I was there. I mean, I was there on invite, not crashing this party. So I figured if the featured speaker wanted me to be there, then that should be the case. And I made my story very clear, and I was amazed by how welcoming everybody was and how much everything was completely open and on the table, how warm, and it was certainly interesting to get reactions from people and to see their faces when I said, "Oh, I'm an atheist," and they went, "Oh, I kept." My brother was with me; he was my cameraman, and just did not want to use the camera very much. So I do have a couple of pictures that I'll be bringing up here shortly. But the event was fantastic. So I just want to give a brief rundown. First of all, when I arrived there, I met Eric Hovind for the first time again, and we did have an opportunity for a photo op. That is 1368, Joey, if you can show that one. This is me meeting Eric when I came into the the event. He was luckily right at the entryway because he was the one that had the tickets on hold for us. So I didn't have to look for him or anything. It was really nice, and I don't know if the picture shows there were deer there as well, which was interesting to say the least. There is a ministry of sorts that goes on in the Green Bay area that uses these very, very large antler deer to open the door to talk about God. So that was interesting, if nothing else. It didn't bring it was not a major featured thing of the event, more just they were one of the sponsors that was there. But I learned some things about deer last night, and I can say that at the very minimum, I can walk away saying that I learned that. But I didn't realize when I had arrived that this was a full dinner event with everybody was sitting at tables, round tables of 8. And as a guest of Eric's, I had the opportunity to sit at the main table, my brother and I, with Michael and May, the MC, with Eric, and with Jay Siegert. KGB did join us for a bit, but he has a family with 6 children, so he had a table all by himself, one right over. So it was fantastic. We watched the program opened up with KGB giving a speech about his experiences in coming to Jesus and really interlacing that with his experience as a Packer player. I thought, as a non-Christian, I thought his speech was very motivational. He talked a lot about looking at the Bible as a playbook and how important it is to not only study the playbook, but to implement it properly and to understand it. And I thought that was a fantastic point. He said that it's not enough to just know what it says, but to actually act upon it. As a believer, that's very important. If you're going to be playing on the team, you need to know what the playbook says. That was our. It was, first of all, one of my first times meeting one of the Green Bay Packers. Now, I'll say I'm not a huge Packer fan, but it's always striking to me to be next to a professional sports player because I'm not tall, and they generally are. So there was that, but he was just an engaging guy, very personable. I really liked him, and it was fantastic. I played a pickup game of football with my friends this morning, and I invited him to come along, but unfortunately he had other obligations that it was a Sunday morning. So I would have had more pictures of that. Then after KGB talked, we moved on, and it was Jay Siegert. Now, I had never met Jay before, but I'd seen some of his publications and seen his name about. I had an opportunity to pick up his book that it's out about 3 weeks ago. Let There Be Light is the name of the book. He's signed it for me here. Quoted Jeremiah 32:17 in there. I had to look that one up because I figured it was going to be a fool says in his heart that there is no God. But no, no, that is the scripture that talks about why it or talks about the creation of the world. So unfortunately, I didn't have that one memorized walking into it. I do have a picture of meeting Jay as well, um, and his speech is also the speech that he did. It was, I believe, the title was Evolution. Um, Problematic, or I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the speech. I don't have it written down, but it actually is available if you Google his name, just Jay Seegert. That's Seegert. Um, it's available online. You can watch the whole presentation on YouTube. So that was interesting. It's about a half hour long. I have to say, as a biologist there, he was speaking in very great detail about the theory of evolution and strongly misrepresenting that he's not explicitly an expert. He was a computer programmer in his life before he went full time into this ministry. So I can't blame him entirely, but I'd love to have him on sometime and talk about that. And we did talk about the opportunity for him to come on the show in the future as well. So after that, we broke for an hour and a half to mingle and to eat. And that was fantastic. That was when I had the opportunity to sit with Eric and Jay and Mike LeMay and their other respective guests and have some conversations from a very, very open perspectives that I was not necessarily expecting, but with them asking me questions, me asking them questions. And I thought they made some very good points. One of them, and this is both Jay and Eric made this point during their performances, was about worldviews and how we look at the world in one way or another. And that is the filter through which we see everything. Their basic premise is that if you don't look through things from a biblical worldview, you'll never see things in a biblical way. And I tend to agree with that. I thought that was a marvelous point. They also brought up the book of Genesis, why they are young earth creationists, why they believe that the earth is 6,000 years old and that humans and dinosaurs coexisted. And that is that if we can't trust God on Genesis, how can we trust any of the Bible? Specifically using the quote from, I believe it was Jay's son or Jay's daughter, who said, well, when does the Bible start telling the truth? And I thought that was an interesting point, to say the least. But I think that most people would agree that it's rather evident where the authors of the Bible were trying to be literal on it and not. And I do not see Genesis to be even an attempt at a literal account, but that's, that is where they come from, and I think that is a respectful position. After dinner, we had Eric did his speech, and that was entertaining. He talked about evolution, the theory of evolution, and very specifically had a list of lies that biologists and that scientists tell people. And it was a lot of fun because he went through. He's a great speaker, very animated, very entertaining, and it was fun to watch. I was blown away with how engaging he is. I wish I had that kind of talent. But he when he was done with the speech, he sat down back next to me, and it was interesting because sitting right next to me, he leaned over and he said, "Wow, it's a little awkward to sit down next to an atheist after that," after saying all of that. And I had to point out that I'm not just an atheist; I'm also an evolutionary biologist. So that was a fun point of the night. It was nice to come into it with our a very fun attitude between each other and not combative in any way. And of course, then there was Mike LeMay, who he was just the MC for the night, did not do much of his own presentation, did talk a little bit, but I'm really excited about that one as well. He runs one of the Christian stations in the area. It was full of questions, and I may very well be appearing on his radio show in the future, or one of the shows on his station in the near future. So we're working on coordinating that, and of course, I'll let you know before that happens because that is broadcast online, and I'll make sure that that comes out to any of our viewers so you know when to watch or listen, as it were. Um, the last thing I want to say before I bring Bob onto the show is that Jay asked me a question during dinner. Jay said, uh, when we were talking about the question of worldviews, he asked me when I said that I agree with that, but I think that my worldview is from a scientific, it is an evidence-based worldview that I see things, the worldview I see things as is that things should have evidence to be justifiably believed. And his question from that was, what kind of evidence could make you believe in a God? It could prove to you that there is a God. Of course, my first response to that is nothing proves a positive, but I did come up with a little bit of a list for that which I thought would be um, very compelling, to say the least, for me. And I wanted to share that, and then we'll bring Bob onto the show. The first one here is a rapture. This group very strongly does believe that at the return of Christ, the true believers will be instantly raptured into heaven and will disappear. Infants out of wombs or fetuses out of wombs, the children disappearing, the empty cars, empty airplanes, pilots gone missing, straight out of the Left Behind series. That would be pretty compelling to me. I'm not going to lie. It'd be real hard for me to see that in any way, particularly given the way that it's been predicted. And that leads into the next point. Um, predictions, prophecies. Now, there are prophecies in the Bible. There's plenty of things that are said to be projected into the future, a prediction. And then there's times that it is fulfilled in the Bible, which I think that speaks to itself in some ways. Now, obviously, that's a little tongue in cheek that they're written in different books and it's fulfilled. But those who were writing the Bible were familiar with these prophecies, and even then, in almost every case, there was not a single prophecy in the Bible that they said, well, we know that this is going to happen here in this place at this time. What they did is they looked back and said, well, this was obviously the fulfillment of that prophecy. What I mean when I say prophecy is if somebody said on October 24th of 2013, there will be a massive earthquake. You don't need to tell me a place. You don't need to tell me a time. But say a day, specific, at least that level of specificity, and say this earthquake will kill between 100,000 and 103,000 people. Still, that's a 3,000 person window. That's specific enough. That would be pretty compelling to me that this person had some sort of knowledge of the future, and that at the very minimum would be compelling. There's also a scripture in Mark, and it's mentioned in a few other of the books of the Bible, but it says that the signs of believers, being able to take up serpents in their hands, drink poison and not be harmed by it, speak in tongues, then be new tongues, and tongues that are understood by anybody who listens, no matter what their native tongue is, as in the first Pentecost. Heal the sick. That's another one that the true believers should be doing. And I'll tell you what, there are faith healing seminars, but I have never once seen an amputee regrow a limb at one of those, or a horribly disfigured person have their scars removed. That would be compelling. And the last one, of course, would be the appearance of God directly. I'm not going to deny things when they're staring me in the face. And obviously, there'd be some scrutiny. Somebody claiming to be God doesn't necessarily mean to be God. And even if it was appearing only to me, I'd be pretty dubious. I'd probably think that I've gone crazy. And I look for consensus for other people. But if enough people are seeing this, and if it has some sort of special abilities, that would be pretty compelling to me. And the last one is, of course, the implantation of knowledge. If this God did appear and said, here, anybody who's seen Star Trek, has seen the Vulcan mind meld. If this God were to say, here, now you know, and to implant knowledge into me, these are signs, these are ways that I, as an atheist, could easily be converted. And what was interesting is when they had asked me that, and I was able to give them those answers, and I said, so, what could change your mind? And their answer was absolutely nothing. On that note, I wanted to say, Bob, thank you for bearing with me. Bob listens when I'm on my monologues here, so um, thank you for bearing with me, and welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
Thank you, Greg. And I just wanted to say one thing. Hold on a
What's
second.
that?
Greg, I hope you're listening.
Oh, you shouldn't have told me it was you that needed to say that.
I just,
Like, there's somebody
I'm
who
just,
wants to say something here.
yeah.
Uh,
Hey, good to talk to you. I'm glad you had a chance to see this, and it is impressive. Sometimes I've been to a number of these, kinds of events. Not necessarily a creation event, but other. And sometimes when people get together from far and wide, it can be a ton of fun, lots of great food, and people usually in an excellent mood.
the food was fantastic, and yeah, people were very, very friendly. I really was impressed with the crowd there and how open and welcome they were to me, who was, I mean, I've been described by many people, or atheists in general, have been described as evil and deceitful and dangerous to allow near your children. So I was impressed.
Yeah, they're
I
probably
also I
praying
wanted
for
to
you.
mention I missed the opportunity to do our Halloween special, and I have not seen that posted yet. So I look forward to that. Bob, what were your thoughts on that revival? You think
Oh,
it
I
was?
didn't get a chance to see it. I was just sitting here behind the camera. I never got a chance to see it, but my wife was watching from the other room and she was laughing her fool head off. She thought it was funny. And maybe it's a good thing you weren't there, because if you had been there for it, you'd have been going to this little revival thing saved.
Right, that would have been wrong. It would.
No, we had a good time, and I'm looking forward to seeing the video, because my wife is telling me that I really missed what it was like to see Michael Jones and even Rhonda, and the way everyone was behaving. But I tell you, we had a blast. It was fun. I was just going by the cuff. If we had it to do over again, if we'll do it something like this next year, I'm prepared to even pull out more stops. But we had some fun. It was
I'll
it
plan
was
around that for
fun.
next year. That's this year was short notice. I unfortunately already had plans and was not able to change that. Man, I'm sad that I missed that. That would have been two revivals for an atheist in 1 week. I could have been
This
saved
would have
twice.
prepared you. Yeah.
So, uh, Bob, I wanted to ask your opinion on that one. I know that we've talked a bit in the past about your understanding that your beliefs are not necessarily compelling, but what is your take on some of their arguments about the worldview and trusting things in the Bible? That if you can't trust every single word of it, how can you trust any of it?
Of course,
What's your understanding?
even though I'm a theist, even though I would call myself a follower of Christ, I certainly don't share that belief with them. This text was written by people, some of it more, 2,000 years ago, some of it even farther back than that. And, as I read this text, I do not see anything that tells me these people were in any way ahead of their time. And I, you know, I also see several problems with it that I think a person has to be dishonest about, or at least um, it makes me, you know, when I see these people sometimes who really believe that everything in the Bible somehow is very consistent and very infallible, and yet I'm looking at certain aspects of it that I find to be textually obviously human. I It makes me wonder how they have to distort their perspective to actually even think that way. I do see the biblical text as being important, as being significant, as being a testimony of sorts. But just like if you've ever been at a trial, in sitting in the jury, and two or three different witnesses to a particular event might speak up, You can decide that an event happened based on the testimony of these people, even though you're under the impression these people certainly saw it through their own eyes in a way that made sense to them. And I think that in many ways, we have a lot of the texts of the Bible that come across that way, that things were said, conclusions held on to, and ideas entertained that were just ideas that made sense to them. And so I think if you're going to have a worldview where you have to filter everything through the Bible, you can't make much progress for what we've done in the last 2,000 years. You're stuck in the past, and basically you're ignoring so much that the human race has learned. I just can't entertain that notion.
I had that very same question when I was talking with them at dinner about the biblical worldview and about circular reasoning, which Eric and I had talked about, or we had all talked about, obviously, when he was on the show, and how if you start with the assumption that God is real and God wrote the Bible and that the Bible is the inerrant word of God, God inspired the writing of the Bible and it's the inerrant word of God, then there's absolutely no way to disprove that. If that's your starting place, there's no way for that to not be true in your eyes. And I think that that speaks volumes about how difficult these conversations can be, and also how important they can be. What I'd love to see is a conversation between somebody that takes that position and somebody who takes the exact same position with a different religious text. Say, for example, even just a different translation of the same religious text. Jehovah's Witnesses, for example. Or if we had a Muslim imam speaking about their, it would need to be a very fundamental worldview. But and I brought that up, and the thing that the thing that Eric said is that he is happy to come and bring his message to different places, but he does not think that he would ever. This is when we were talking about having me on the Christian network or the Christian radio station. He said he doesn't think that he would do that and invite an atheist onto his show because when you already know the truth, what's the purpose to entertaining contradictory ideas? And I didn't know how to respond to that one. I guess that's a solid understanding of the truth, but how do you know? And he went into that during his presentation. This is the same point that he talked about during our show, and he was trying to work to, is that knowledge, and he used actually the same analogy of the 1% of all knowledge. If you know 1% of all knowledge, or you think you know that, is it possible that something in the other 99% of knowledge is going to disprove 1% or the 1% that you think you know? And the obvious conclusion to that is sure, yeah, absolutely. There are things that can be known with absolutes, but those are deductive reasoning. Anything inductive is certainly replaceable in that way. And his argument, as it came to its full culmination that we never got to on the show, we just ran out of time, was that what it boils down to is there's only one way to know anything. That to know it, and he's using the definition of knowledge as absolute, to know it without a doubt and to be 100% sure. There are two ways that can be the case. The first one is to know everything. If you know everything, you can state unequivocally that you know any single thing, because it's not possible that some new information will come around that will show that to not be true. The other side of that is the other way to do it is to know somebody who knows everything. And that would be the appeal that since God is omnipotent and omniscient, knows everything, then as long as you know God and you know that God wrote this book, then you can know anything. You can know whatever God has told you. And I think that the fundamental flaw to that argument, and I'm hoping Eric is in town until Wednesday, so we're going to be coordinating a meeting where I can interview him again and have something recorded for posterity's sake. We may just put that right up on YouTube, or it may become integrated into a show. But I'm hoping to discuss with him that still presupposes that you have the knowledge of God. That unless you know somebody that knows everything, and you know that somebody knows everything, and you know that somebody always tells the truth, then it's not possible to know anything with absolute knowledge. And that if it's possible to know those things without that being given to you from God, then it's possible to know anything else. So it's a self-defeating argument in that way. But um,
Well, I think there's other problems too. I mean, for example, where the biblical text says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor my ways your ways, and there appears to be certain teachings from the Bible that would even teach that even if God did know everything, and he were to actually tell you something that is something he knows, there's no guarantee that you have the capacity to truly understand it for what it is as it was expressed. So there's one of the flaws that I see in the fundamentalist mindset is that they do not see there being any steps between an idea being taught and understanding it. That to them, if a truth has been preached, there you go, you have it. And the idea that our perspective or our way of understanding or any biosemiotic element has anything to do with it all is something that seems to be totally absent. There's just this straightforward assumption that all ideas that are known are just simply ideas, and once they're known, you know them. Period. And to me, that's it's a very elementary, kind of almost a primary view of knowledge. And I think that you didn't become a biologist by sitting in class and hearing certain things and just knowing them perfectly. You had to work with them, struggle with them. You had to do a couple of tests. You also began to appreciate them. The more you did, okay, and you see things thicker and greater. So there's just this false assumption as to the process of perception and of appreciation.
Well, and I absolutely agree. I think that knowledge of any kind is so much more solid when you discover it on your own. When you come to this from your own conclusion. Now, mind you, that's not all that reliable in every way. Personal conclusions are very frequently incorrect. But if somebody just tells me something, and I want to take that on their authority, then that's something that the only support that I can possibly have for that is that person's authorities. Take, for example, the guest we had last week, Mike Shaw. Aside from him, if he was the only person who spoke about tardigrades, who had ever documented anything about them, and he came on the show to tell us how incredible these creatures are, I might have to accuse him of making it up. I mean, it may it may not be true, because any evidence that what he's saying is true is all coming from him and exclusively from him. Luckily, in Mike's case, he has photos, he has all kinds of documents, he has thousands of other scientists. I mean, he's done this because of their research. He's built upon it. So it's not coming from his authority. It's coming from the authority of photos and of documented experiments and from videos and
peer review
specimens. And it's
Greg, there's one other thing that occurs to me, even from the text of Scripture, that I would think that somebody offering that argument of knowledge, knowing somebody who knows everything, is that in the chapter that is often very looked at, the love chapter of 1 Corinthians 13, where it talks about what love is like. As that chapter comes to an end, it says, now we know in part and we speak in part. But when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. And it talks about, like when I was a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put away the childish things. Well, anyway, as it goes on, it talks about how today in this world we're kind of like the child versus the adult who now knows, as we see through a dimmed glass. We just know in part, and when we talk, we only know a little bit about what we're saying. And so it seems to me that the text of Scripture itself claims that the Christian does not know everything, that the Christian doesn't even know everything about what it is that supposedly God is showing them. So I think that there's a part of his argument that is almost unbiblical. Unfortunately, not
That's an
only
interesting
illogical but
point. I
unbiblical.
may have to talk to him about that one. I also, I'm
Yeah,
an
if
expert
you're going
on
to
this
see him
one, but
talk to him
something
about
that
that.
he
First
had
Corinthians
cited.
chapter 13, verses 8 through 13 might be interesting.
Yeah, that's I First Corinthians. I've certainly heard that one enough times. Actually, it was mentioned during my own wedding when the priest who was performing the ceremony was talking about in the homily how refreshing it was to have a wedding that didn't use that scripture. But I've certainly I'm familiar with it, and I always thought it was interesting when it went beyond just the what love is into the second part there, because I don't see how that fits in with the wedding context. But you're right; that does make a very interesting point about our ability to know and our ability to reason. However, isn't there another scripture that says that we all know that there's a God, that's implanted within us in some way, or that we're born knowing that? I don't.
Yeah, Eric even talked about that. He claimed that from Romans chapter 1, I believe it was, that God has made it obvious to it that certain things about God are self-evident and that we have turned away from it. He claimed that there was this innate knowledge. Um, and although I think that there's something similar to what he was talking about that I see as the purpose of that text, that's what he was talking about from there, talking about how, God made it obvious to us through creation and through natural revelation that we can actually really know there is a God, and we all do know this, and we're just living in suppressing the truth if we don't acknowledge it. That's a very common.
Yeah, I've certainly heard the argument made before.
Yeah.
I did want to say we have a viewer comment here. I think it's fantastic. This is going back a little bit to talking about the axioms or first principles, that which the starting points from which we reason, or the worldviews, as Eric was talking about it. But the comment says, and I don't have a name for who this commenter was, but it's a fantastic comment. Thank you. It says, if we begin with a premise to find out if it follows through to a logical conclusion, then its very purpose is to be disproven. Not all premises that we begin with are incapable of being disproven, nor intended to be impenetrable. So it's possible to begin with the premise that God exists, simply to find out if it follows through to a logical conclusion. The viewer then clarified in saying, what I'm saying is, this is what I'm saying. Axioms are not always intended to be pillars of unwavering truth. Actually, that might be allowed, intended. No, I think it's supposed to mean always, but always intended to be pillars of unwavering truth. And I'd absolutely have to agree. I think that that's when I talk about the null hypothesis. That's exactly what I mean. In science, when you write a hypothesis, if it is not a testable statement, it is supposed to be. It's an axiom. You're saying this is true, and then you test it, because without tests, anything can be true. So the God hypothesis.
And I would say that it's also, there's probably a lot of things that are true that can't be tested, but we just can't verify or validate that they're true.
That's absolutely true, but not every statement is even testable. But in science, at least, that which is not testable is a poorly written hypothesis. That's not a hypothesis at all. It's simply a statement. And I think that that's what this is getting to. I might be wrong. Forgive me, viewer, if I'm interpreting this wrongly. But it says, if we begin with a premise to find out if it follows through to a logical conclusion, then its very purpose is to be disproven. So we can do that with the premise that God exists. So I have a question, this is a question that I've seen before: is what would we expect the world to look like if the God of the Bible existed? If the young Earth creationist ideology is absolutely true, if the world is 6,000 years old and people and dinosaurs coexisted, what would we expect the world to look like if that was the case.
Mm.
And I think that Eric and his father and Ken Ham and some of the other people of this movement have done a fantastic job going through some mental gymnastics to make the science, or to interpret the science in a way that makes it allowable in some understandings, but you've got to make some pretty big leaps. We would have to see that this massive amount of water essentially came from nowhere and went away to nowhere, and that humans and dinosaurs, if we did coexist, you'd think that the early cave paintings that we had would depict something of that nature, or that
Yeah.
we'd find human remains inside of the stomach of a dinosaur, there's so many things that we would expect to be the case, and they're not. So, I mean, based on that premise, or the test of that premise, I'd have to say it can't be true.
Yeah, I can tell you where they think the water is and where it came from.
Where is it? What is the
Well,
answer?
they a lot of them would argue that as the Earth as time goes on, that some of this water becomes hydrogen, as it were, and just kind of drifts off into space. But it is believed by many biblicists that the Earth was at one time a terrarium, where there was in the upper atmosphere a bubble of water, that also the Earth was actually inside a bubble, and that the bubble burst and the waters came down, and that's where the worldwide flood came from. And then the world being a terrarium, because it's inside of this bubble, then poles begin to freeze, and the water gets soaked up into the ice on the poles. And a lot of them would believe that that's where the water went, and where it came from was the bubble around the Earth.
Huh. Well, that's interesting, and that would be another one of those premises that would have things that would lead to, or we could ask, what would we expect to happen if
it would
that
say
is
the
the
Grand
case, what
Canyon
would we
would be an
expect?
example of that.
And I mean, what we would expect from something like that was that water, of course, has optical qualities, and they would make a much, much dimmer Earth. We'd have to have probably, I'm guessing, several miles worth of water in this barrier, and I'd be hard pressed to imagine any light making through or several miles worth of water.
Well, if it's a
Even
bubble
so, the
there,
greenhouse effect would be enormous. I'd
I would
have
think.
to
Yeah,
wager.
the bubble could be rather thin when it's that far out. But
Yeah, I guess it does depend on how far out it is.
yeah, but I mean, to me, it's an interesting theory. But I think that as you mentioned, the greenhouse effect and all that, we could probably even predict what that would be like. But anyway, I mean, they do have answers for these things. It's not as if they haven't been asked these questions and they haven't thought of some ideas. But there
Well,
is
no, that's
not,
what
as
I'm
you would
saying. I
say,
think they've done a fantastic job with making things up. I mean, these are ad hoc explanations, and they make. I mean, I was watching this presentation yesterday. These presentations, and I have to say, if I didn't know better, they'd seem convincing. If I was not a scientist, I
right.
understand how this comes about, and I.
That's a big clue. That's a big clue. If you were not a scientist, and this is the one thing. This is one of the hard things that anybody who's an expert has. If you're an expert at anything, the moment you're talking to people who are not an expert, you are in a powerful position of manipulation and deception. So this is one of the reasons why a lot of scientists talk to other scientists, and they're not really even interested in getting involved in the stupidity of an argument over an idea that is well accepted among scientists.
I can understand that, and I know that that's often also been thrown at them. I know Dinesh just, or no, not Dinesh, Deepak Chopra just did a Clint Eastwood style debate against Richard Dawkins, who refused to show up for the debate. So Deepak Chopra debated in an empty chair. And the reason that Dawkins said that he didn't want to do the debate is because it's been done, and because the goal of these debates is not to listen, to show anything. Now, I guess we only have about a minute left, and I do need to wrap it up. But I wanted to say that we also have another interesting dynamic on this show is that we don't debate per se, we discuss. And that's, I don't think that it's worthless. I don't think we're wasting our time in doing that. But when we bring guests on, it's very unlikely that there's suddenly going to be a aha moment and they're going to switch their entire worldview. But I want to expose our audience and our viewers to all of these ideas. And the one thing that I ask is that you don't take anything that I say at face value. You don't listen to me when I appeal to authority, but I try to avoid doing that. But, I think that that's a dangerous way of reasoning. That if I say something, I would love nothing better than to have viewers sending in messages saying, here's how you were wrong with that. Email us, send me a text message or send it in. That's what I want is the skepticism, people giving their own opinions and researching, digging for the facts. That is intellectual honesty. That's what we are fighting for. Without skepticism, without reading or researching things your own, there is no such thing as honesty. It's authority. And with that, it all comes down to trust in the honesty and the ability of that authority. So I did want to say next week we do have a guest coming on who his name is Augustine Nastasio. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. I'm going with the pronunciation I'd imagine comes. But this may be another one of the conversations like that. Augustine, he is an apologist. And, don't take what I say to him on face value. Don't take what Bob says to him on face value. Research what we talk about. Look into it. And please, if something doesn't seem right, send us messages. I'd love to let him know that it's not just me and Bob coming up with our criticisms. So I'm going to sign off. Bob, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we go?
No, I'm glad you had a chance to visit visit that event. And also, just want to make one correction. You should listen to me.
Right. I'm sorry. When I say we should not respect or appeals to authority are not valid, I mean other than Bob's. Obviously, Bob is the authority. And with that, we'll close with a quick nod to the authority that is Bob. Thank you. This has been Inspiring Honesty. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week at 6:00, or next Sunday night. And we will be joined by Augustine Nastasio for another fantastic conversation. I'll be getting in touch with him here tomorrow to figure out exactly what we'll be talking about. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.